Hey everybody, Cody Menz here. Another WoT's new video. Lots of stuff to cover today. Between the black market, the New Balance, basically tech tree discounts for NA server, the black market, lots of stuff. In any event, first and foremost, tech tree discount starting today, Valentine's Day, on the NA server, 15% off. You can hear it from Cabbage, Jamba John, and Tragic Loss. Basically on their Twitch stream tonight, and also they stream on Facebook and YouTube at the same time, Tuesdays and Wednesdays. 15% off tier 8 to 10s in the tech trade. Buy those tanks, you don't get these too often. 1.8 common test server updated today, basically with some frontline changes. They are reworking Normandy and Craftwork a little bit, and starting to get closer to releasing Frontline when it comes down to it, because Frontline is coming out in March, so very soon here. Dynasties Wars ended finally. Also Team Clash since the last time you guys saw me. I feel like both of these events went over pretty darn well. This just says basically on the NA server to make sure to claim your prizes, but if you don't, they'll automatically basically be applied. And getting into Frontline here, which I'm trying to speed through the news here because I would like to talk about New Balance as well. March 9th, Frontline comes back. Steel Hunter is coming back later on in the year, I believe in August for Steel Hunter. But the way that Frontline is working, basically we're going to see it in March, twice in April, once in May. There's basically 4 iterations of Frontline. There's going to be daily missions that earn some bonds, and you're only going to have to rank up 1 to 15. No prestiging, and you earn tokens basically each time. You hit basically 1, 2, and 3 here. You can earn up to 12 tokens across all 4 front lines for this year, and each one of the tier 9 reward tanks, the Object 777 variant 2, Char Future 4, and AE Phase 1 costs 12 tokens. And between Frontline and Steel Hunter, you can earn a maximum of 24, so then you can get 2 out of the 3 of these tanks, and you can either get them all on Frontline and not play Steel Hunter. You can play both, or you can kind of share your tokens between them and just get one of the tanks if you would like that. Now they're doing tank rentals again. They're reworking airstrikes. You can read about all of these links in the video description in the order that you see them here if you would like to read in further. This is basically announcing, they're calling it World of Tanks Expedition because, you know, Steel Hunter and Frontline kind of feed in together. They're not alternating them, like I said. Basically, Frontline we're going to see in the first half of this year, Steel Hunter in the second half. Most likely because they're probably still working on Steel Hunter. They want to have a second map ready. I believe Berlin is going to be that map, a variant of it, because I think we're also seeing that in standard battles. They also want to add in more depth to Steel Hunter and fix some issues from last year. But pretty excited. This is awesome. You won't be able to catch up for Frontline, which is the downside. So if you want to do all your grinding on the last, you know, say the 4th, you know, part, stage 4 Frontline, can't do that. You only can earn the respective tokens during each stage. That's a pretty big downside, but they did state that the overall grind compared to last year should be somewhere between half and, you know, the full grind, so somewhere around 3/4. So it should be a little bit shorter to grind. Frontline is Steel Hunter, and get yourself a tier 9 for these modes. Now this, it's going to blind you. Boink, a little bright. This is basically just a list of the black market. You know, the black market honestly has some issues, technical issues, but also some of the offerings were kind of, you know, they flopped depending on the server. And, you know, that's the problem I feel like that Wargame is going to have, because, you know, the more that they offer things, which getting to the, you know, basically Sandbox and New Balance, we might see some new tanks being offered in the black market in the future. A lot of things didn't sell out. The 3D style especially flopped. And the orders, a lot of people thought it was weird. I don't mind them selling the orders because it doesn't give you, say, Object 260. Helps you a little bit. You know, some people are mad, but, you know, it's not going to give them the tank. You're still going to have to earn it. It just makes it a little bit easier to get a tank that was released how many years ago? 4 years ago or something? In any event, though, bulk of my video here, I would like to cover basically the New Balance and Sandbox. So I feel like this is something really important, not getting enough attention. I literally just finished a live stream tonight. It's my second one that I did for the New Balance and the Sandbox. You don't see a lot of people doing it. The first day you saw some EUCCs and like RUCCs and basically people streaming it and covering it, and now nothing. Nobody is like playing on it again. And like literally the first day it came out, like I was streaming that evening, NA, no one was streaming it except for me. It feels like a lot of people aren't testing and trying because Wargaming wants feedback. You know, they're taking data directly from people playing it, and also they want your feedback. You can find links on your respective server in the forums, and they are basically looking for feedback from people. Ultimately, you know, they are giving you some stuff from playing on there too, like premium time and stuff like that, and it's a little annoying when it comes down to it for me, because they've been doing these sandbox tests for almost a year now, and you see a lot of people like, they're rushing it. Where the hell are all these changes coming from? And they've been testing them from almost a year now, to where it's like, I don't know where it's all coming from. Like, I've been talking about it a lot even without the sandboxes being up until now, and I don't know if people have been living under a rock, but the changes I think are pretty nice. They're not perfect, and there's a link in the video description to this basically stream that I did tonight. It's about 3.5 hours long, but you know, if you have a lot of questions about it, I would recommend watching it, not just to plug my own stuff, but I go over a lot of the info about New Balance and the Sandbox server and explain it, and answer a lot of questions about it if you're confused about it. I'm going to go over the basics here without going too much in depth, because I could talk about this for an hour. In any event, I'm just going to go kind of basically piece by piece here, because I tried to start talking about it, and this is my second attempt at this video, because yeah, I got really off topic. In any sense, or anyway, when you start looking at the shell changes, what they're trying to do is, right now, most people can agree that World of Tanks isn't really that balanced right now. Premium spam has really negated armor, in a sense, and you really just have one shell that most of the time, like, there are drawbacks to heat and APCR sometimes compared to AP, but really there's just the cost that's the negative factor. You have one shell that is just your best shell, and the only thing keeping it in check is how much credits you want to swear, or how many credits, and it doesn't matter as much because you have premium account plus boosters and, you know, premium tanks and stuff like that, to where you can still earn credits while just flinging gold left and right. In any way, what they're trying to do is they buffed standard shell damage up, tank HP up. So your standard shells are doing essentially the same amount of damage percentage wise to tanks as they are in the live server on the New Balance. There might be like different values popping up. Like, for example, the FV4005 stage 2, your AP shell does 1440 damage compared to 1150 damage on the live server. Shooting a T110E5 on the New Balance, you, for each AP shot, if it just rolls average, you do 52.3% of the T110E5's HP per shot on New Balance. On the live server, you do 52.4%, so a 0.1% difference. Standard shells work practically the same on the New Balance as they do on the live server. The only caveat is tier 1 to tier 6, they buff the tank HP higher up than the damage for your standard rounds get, because they want to increase the time to kill and make the game a little bit more enjoyable for lower tiers. I love that change. Been saying they should do it for years, and a lot of people agree, because lower tiers, is it really fun? A new player pull one out there in their little tank and you get auto cannon down in 2 seconds and you don't know what the hell happened. And you just sit there cowering behind rocks and you do it to people because that's really the only way that you can play, especially as a new player. It doesn't teach you anything, it's dying in a couple seconds. Love that change. Now, something that is a little controversial is changes to HE shells. So I went over this a lot on my live stream. Basically with HE shells, I disagree a little bit to where I feel like Hesh needs some work. I feel like tanks that have premium Hesh shouldn't lose penetration. I feel like they should have their standard shell. They should have their standard HE shell, or Hesh if they wanted to call it a standard Hesh shell. And then the premium Hesh should basically keep the penetration but have less damage as their AP shell. It should be basically, you know, somewhere a little bit lower. Kind of like how they were trying to rebalance the Type 5 Heavy initially before they just kind of stopped with that and just gave it a normal HE shell. Or a normal and a premium HE shell that, yeah, is just flat out better than the standard one. In any event, though, so essentially what they're doing, the main change to HE shells, for practically all tanks, except for the KV2, that's the only standard tank that keeps penetration. I disagree with that. It should get preferential treatment. Already keeps penetration on its HE shells because they still want, from my understanding, the only reason I came up with, they still want Arty to cause internal module damage if it hits something directly through the roof, like light tanks, medium tanks, lightly armored, heavies and stuff. Because it still has pen, it'll still do internal module damage if you pen. But essentially, they're changing the HE shell mechanics, and the easiest way to explain this, right now in a live server, if you shoot an HE shell at a piece of armor and it doesn't pen, it cuts your HE shell damage automatically in half. And then half of your shell's damage, say if you have 500, you hit the piece of armor, it doesn't pen. That's going to drop down to 250 damage. Then it applies that to the armor effectiveness or space armor, so on and so forth, and it figures out the damage afterwards. On the Sandbox New Balance, if, you know, they're removing penetration from most HE shells again, if you hit that piece of armor, you're not going to pen now because there's no pen. However, your HE shell will now apply 100% of your HE shell's damage to this piece of armor, and it will figure out the damage based off of the armor thickness, so on and so forth, instead of cutting in half because they removed the penetration from the equation. Now, when it comes to the outer circle of your basically HE shell, if it's finding that it should cause damage there, if that's the weakest piece of armor, on the New Balance, it will apply 20% of the HE shell's damage on the edge of the circle, whereas, which I probably should do this, whereas on the live server, it'll only apply 5% of the damage. So there's a little bit more, you know, I guess the damage bleeds a little bit more to the outer edge if it applies it there. That's important. It won't always take the outer edge if it has a better spot to apply it to in the center. It's the main change with HE. For most tanks, what they did was, so like the M4 Sherman, for example, with the 105mm, 410 damage with the HE shell on a live server, 53mm of pen. New Balance, it does 205, so just cut in half. 0mm of pen. Me personally, I feel like instead of just cutting it in half, 50%, it should keep about 55 to 60% of its damage to account for it losing that penetration. If they did that, I feel like HE would be fine for basically all standard tanks. I feel like it would work okay. Now for Hesh tanks, take the Centurion MK7, which I'm just going to swap over because it's easier for me to explain this visually here. So the Centurion MK7 here, on the New Balance, when it comes down to this tank, you now have your standard shell, which, you know, sees a basically damage increase because that's what they're doing. Excuse me here. And then you have your premium Hesh, which does 0mm of pen now, 400 damage, standard HE 320. Whereas on the live server, your premium Hesh round does 480 damage with 210mm of pen. So they're not cutting that premium Hesh or even the standard Hesh shell down in half like they did to that M4 Sherman with standard HE. They're giving it a little bit extra damage to compensate for losing the pen. I don't feel like that's good enough because it just still doesn't feel potent, the special Hesh shell, because they left the higher price in, which I really hope they revisit. I don't think we need special rounds to be that much more expensive than standard. I'd be comfortable with them, say the MK7 or all other, say the T49, the FE4005 Stage 5, tanks that have premium Hesh or rely on, say, howitzer and derp guns and stuff like that, that rely on like a special HE shell, they should let it keep, say, that 210 millimeters of penetration that the MK7 has on that Hesh round. Leave the standard HE with 0 millimeters of pen if they want to. However, they should basically say, give it, I don't know, 360 or even 400 by 400 probably would be fine, but let it keep that penetration. It has lower damage than your AP shell. It's not like it's causing higher damage, but I feel like it would still, I feel like premium Hesh still needs to have penetration. I feel like that shouldn't lose it. The same thing, like, I know the T49 premium, it's premium HE. I wouldn't mind them like renaming it just, special Hesh rounds, for tanks like that. That way it's not confusing. They keep pen. All other standard HE loses it, in a sense. In any event, moving on though, because this is going to start being really confusing. The next thing that they're going to be doing here is, let's move down, artillery. Something they're trying to do is adding decision making into SPGs. Basically, you're going to have 3 types of shells. Your standard HE shell is not going to change at all. Same damage, same stun, same splash radius. Now remember, all tanks are having their HP buffed. Arty isn't really going to receive that buff for the most part. Some Arties, from my understanding, might change a little bit. For the most part, they're getting the least amount of HP buff, so it's actually going to be easier to kill Arty. And anyway, that standard HE shell doesn't change, so essentially that's doing a little bit less damage per shot, relatively speaking, but it does have stun and it has some splash. The special HE shell for Arty receives a damage increase relative to the tank's HP buff that's getting, the rest of the tanks are getting for that tier. So you're doing the same amount of damage proportionately with that special HE shell as you would be on the live server right now. However, you're going to get the small little splash radius buff that you currently have with premium HE shells, but you lose all of your stun. You do not stun with those HE shells. So Wargaming, I feel like, listen to people that don't like stun and don't like taking damage from Arty. So Arty's going to have to pick between those 2 HE shells, whether or not they're going to do stun but less damage, or they're going to do more damage but no stun. But it's not more damage, it's the same damage as the live server. So it's actually making Arty pick and choose a little bit now. And then finally, for all tech tree Arties, especially in the high tiers, there's a AP or heat shell. I feel like that's a little bit low damage. Like the T92 at tier 10, I believe, is 580 damage, which is nothing when you only shoot, about a round or 1.25 or 1.5 up to 1.5 rounds per minute. 580 damage is nothing. And basically, you have a lot of penetration. You have no stun, no splash because it's AP or heat, where you're going to be doing damage to one tank directly. I feel like it's meant to shoot like super heavies and stuff like that, but it's really risky because you have to penetrate them and you can't miss because there's no splash. I feel like the damage is a little bit low. Most people agree it's pretty worthless to use it for the most part. I think that they should balance that around not being higher than like the average TD damage for the tier. So at tier 10, so the T92, instead of 580 damage, do like 750. I feel like, honestly, it would still be really risky, but, getting shot by a 750 damage round, and remember, tank HP was risen up, so, if you're getting shot by that, it's not that much damage over time. It's still, T92 would be pumping out like a little over 1,000 damage per minute, which is nothing. But in any event, they're adding in decision making for Arty. So you're going to have to be swapping between 3 different shells now to get the most out of your Arty. For a lot of people who hate Arty, if you think that Arty players don't try and they don't have to work for their damage and stuff like that, and you don't think like they're good players, awesome. Like now, if you think that way, Arties are going to have a more difficult time basically playing against you. For people who like playing Arty, Wargaming's basically trying to keep the options available to you and adding in more diverse gameplay and decision making. Yes, it makes your job a little bit harder, but if you like playing SPGs and like that type of gameplay, you're gonna have to swap between 3 rounds and kind of think like, should I use standard HE? Should I use my special HE? Should I use AP? And you're still gonna be able to get a lot out of Arty, you know, relative to the live server. You just have to use the best shell for that situation. Now, the one other thing that basically, the big thing that they're doing is revising the tech tree. There's a lot of misconceptions about this, to where what they are doing is they're removing about 92 tanks. It's a lot of it. And before I get to that, one final thing. So the tank HP, again, they're raising tier 1 to tier 6 higher than the damage. So the time to kill raises there, which is what they're talking about here. Now, 92 tanks sounds like a lot. One thing I'll stress, they are not removing these tanks from the game. What is going to happen here? So before we look at that thing a little bit closer, it doesn't show up 100% on the sandbox because the store isn't fully functional on the sandbox. You will be able to click in the tech tree still, and they're called collector's vehicles. So any, you know, basically tanks removed at the low tiers, and you can see all of these new tech trees in the sandbox client or in the articles and stuff like that in the video they have. You will still be able to buy those tanks. If you own any of the tanks being removed from the tech tree, you still have them. They are not going away. So any tanks removed tier 1 to tier 5, as it say here, will be in that collector's vehicles tab. As long as someone has a tier 6 tank in that nation, you can go into that tab and buy any of those tanks for credits. You don't have to grind them anymore. You just buy them for credits. And the modules are still there, and basically they're the same as they are. It's just a visual change. They're trying to simplify the tech tree to get newer players up to tier 5 and kind of focus them. That way they don't get all confused and burn out before they actually reach the bulk of the game, which is tier 5 to tier 10 for the majority of players. Now, when it comes down to it, tier 6 to 10 tanks, you're still keeping them. There's a lot less of those tanks being removed, most notably at the high tiers. The T62A, AMX-30B, AMX-30 are being removed, and the 113 heavy tank. But there's also tanks like these T71DA, the T67 being removed. I believe the Jumbo Sherman, but there's a full list of that in the basically video of what you can find here in this article. Now, the tier 6 to 10 tanks, they're not removing again from the game. If you own them, you keep them. If you don't have them in your garage at the time that this hits, which is to be determined, it's not anytime soon. Minimum, I would guess 2+ months away, but maybe even further from that. You need to buy them before they get removed, or else you won't be able to get them. Until they say they're going to be re-offering them, like maybe the black market, sell them for credits, maybe the bond shop, or maybe they'll add them in a later date in the collection tab. But you'll have to have, say, like tier 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or whatever in that nation to buy them. So that's very important. They're not removing them at all. It's just they're changing the way the tech tree looks to help newer players out. But if you already have those tanks and you're a veteran player, nothing's really changing, except for if you want those tanks, you should get them ahead of time before they make these changes. Or else you're going to have to buy them in the collection tab, which, great, you don't have to grind experience for them. If they're the higher tiers, you might have to wait until they re-offer them. Now, they're changing in-game statistics a little bit. So they're basically splitting your stats to old stats and current stats. And they are also going to be refining personal missions like they always do. They're going to adjust the in-game economy. So again, they're not going to be changing too much with that. So that still opens up the option for them changing the shell cost and so on and so forth. And like I said, please guys, you know, this lasts for 10 days, the New Balance. And as of the time of this video, about 5 of those days are up. Please try it. You get some goodies basically for trying it. I know it's not a whole lot, but it's some premium time and stuff like that. But I highly recommend trying it. Provide feedback. Again, each server has forum threads, and basically provide your feedback. They are really looking into basically these changes, whether people believe it or not. They've been testing them for about a year, And last but not least, the biggest changes, like tank wise, because otherwise the gameplay, like again, like I've been streaming this and there's a link to that video that I streamed tonight. It feels the same. If you're a premium spammer, like right now, it's going to be tough because, you know, if you're relying on premium shells to pen things, you know, you're going to be doing less damage percentage wise to tanks. But, you know, the game, it needs to have some resemblance of balance, and this will allow them to start rebalancing tanks on an individual basis again, because finally they can balance around armor, firepower, and like flexibility and maneuverability, instead of right now the meta is basically fast tanks and basically like accurate, reliable guns, because armor doesn't really account for too much. Like it does in some sense and like hold down tanks, but you know, right now having premium rounds, it just throws everything out of whack. It's like, come on, there's a tank game, and you have in a tank game for the longest time here something that validates basically in a very important part of a tank, which is freaking armor. So like we're finally trying to address this and trying to add some decision making in the game when it comes to selecting different shells. So, you know, you're gonna have your standard shell, but maybe I should use that, you know, special shell that does more penetration, because I can't get that tank out of that spot that it's, you know, really hold down in, or, you know, I can't get him like baited out to where I can flank him. And the same thing with already adding decision making in there. But the tank that received the biggest change is the T-54E1 is now a heavy tank, and that's one of the very few tanks to where they actually changed the penetration on its standard and premium round. So this tank is awesome now. It was pretty tough to play before because of the low penetration, but this feels closer to the T-57 heavy now than it used to when it was a medium tank. And with a few tanks being removed from the tech tree, most notably the M3 Lee is no longer in the tech tree. You now have the T6 medium tank, and for the British basically line, you have the Cavalier leading to the Cromwell now. So more or less, like, I like these changes. Like I said, I feel like HE and the Hesh needs a little bit of work, and the shell costs I don't exactly agree with, but hopefully they revisit them before this hits the live server. But I highly suggest you guys at least try it, you know, at least get the premium time and goodies for trying it out a little bit. And it's not as scary as it looks when it comes to these changes. And you know, I really hope that maybe this video helped you out a little bit. If not, again, there's a link in the video description to my Twitch live stream. It is pretty long, but I would definitely watch it, and I go over a lot of stuff in depth. Thanks again for watching again. A little sad that Levi ditched me. He wanted to go to bed, and I will see you guys hopefully next Friday for another What's New. Have a good night. Or good night for me, not good night for you guys. Oh god, it's so freaking late. Thank you very much, guys. Oh my god. Have a good one.